face of tyranny.
I want to welcome everyone back to tonight's special broadcast of the Kev Baker Show right here on your favourite alternative media network, www.truthfrequencyradio.com. I keep saying it all the time, but wherever you are, you better be making it TFR. We really are on the rise right now, folks. And it's due to that rise and to all you listeners out there that we're able to ask people like our following guest onto the show. So, less from me. Let's get into it. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Gerald Celente. Okay, tonight, ladies and gentlemen, it gives me great pleasure to say that we're joined by Mr. Gerald Celente. Now, Mr. Gerald Celente is the publisher of the world-renowned TrendsJournal, and you can find his work over at TrendsResearchInstitute.com. Mr. Celente, a big, huge, warm welcome to the Kev Baker Show. How are you doing, sir?
I'm doing wonderful. Thank you so much for having me on.
It's an absolute pleasure. Now, I had the privilege of reading over your latest Trends Journal. Now, in there, I see you were actually talking about Obama at great length. Now, you were saying that he's possibly going to lead America into World War III. What do you mean by that, Gerald?
Well, you can see the steps that they've been taking. Let's not forget, this is a Nobel Peace Prize winner. The man that unilaterally started the Libyan war. They call it a humanitarian mission. They overthrew a government, a sovereign government. And when you look now, we're back in Iraq under the guise of another humanitarian mission. We got to save those Yazidis on the mountain. Everybody knows what a Yazidi is and how precious they are. And, of course, the Christians on the mountain. But when the Christians in ancient Syrian villages were getting slaughtered, that was okay. But now we got to get ISIS because ISIS is doing it. And then, of course, anybody that has the desire, the will, or the courage, all they have to go is onto YouTube and type in the name Victoria Nuland, N-U-L-A-N-D, December 13th, 2013, and there she is, our Assistant Secretary of State at the National Press Club in Washington, brought to you by, over her left shoulder, Chevron, over her right shoulder, Exxon, talking about why the path for Ukraine is with Europe and why Ukraine should follow the path set forth by the International Monetary Federation. Now, here's the American Secretary of State also caught on audio tape with the ambassador, American ambassador to Ukraine in February of 2014, Jeffrey Pyatt, talking about the overthrow and how they were going to do it of the Yanukovych government of Ukraine. So now you have Obama and the American media and most of the Western media condemning Russia for what the United States and NATO have transpired, have invented, have initiated, and they're blaming Russia for the destabilization, and it's working. Because the latest polls out show that Putin is the greatest threat to the world equity markets, and ISIS comes in second, and then bringing up a far third is Ebola.
And the thing is, over here in the UK, Mr. Celente, we're told every second day about Russian bombers all over Europe, yet they never mention the fact that it was NATO encroaching on Russia's western front, basically, that started all this. And then you can go back even to Syria, where Putin was the stumbling block for the actual failed chemical attack, blamed on it was Assad's forces, but it turned out to be probably the guys we now know as ISIS. Are they determined to get a war going with Russia?
They're psychopaths, and nobody wants to call them what they are. Look at these people. How many more wars do they have to start? How many more people do they have to kill before people will call them who they are? I mean, you remember you had Cameron shooting his mouth off about how Gaddafi has to go. You had Blair over there, shooting his mouth off about Saddam Hussein having weapons of mass destruction and ties to Al-Qaeda. You had Sarkozy starting the Libyan war, and Hollande now trumping it up in Syria, and now they're all back into Iraq. So what we're looking at while we're saying Obama has this way about him, as psychopaths do, to be very calm and very collected while they're doing the con job. Again, how many more people do Americans and the Europeans have to slaughter before they call it murder? And going back, to the other issues that you were mentioning about the reaction of Russia from NATO's encroachment. People have, attention deficit disorder. When the Soviet Union collapsed, the deal was clear as day, etched in stone, that the Soviets would give Eastern Germany back to Germany. And as the agreement for that, NATO would not expand any further than it was. And then Bill Clinton, Slick Willie, he broached that one, and he started pushing further and further into Eastern Europe. And then little Georgie Bush kept it going. So now you have U.S. flights, military flights in Estonia. Could you imagine if the Russians were in Canada and Mexico? Hey, how about the Cuban Missile Crisis? But no, it's okay for the Europeans to go into what was formerly Russian territory. So when you're talking about Ukraine and how the way Putin's reacting, and here's the thing, Kevin, John, that blow me away. What imbecile that has a brain between their ears thinks that little boy Cameron, baby cakes Hollande, or BS Obama is going to beat the Russians? If Napoleon couldn't pull it off, if Hitler, who launched the greatest military offensive in world history, couldn't pull it off, how could a bunch of military losers who can't win in Afghanistan, who can't win in Iraq, and who can't win in Libya going to beat the Russians?
Well, Gerald, obviously Putin getting the blame for everything, and we've had the White House press lackeys tell us that separatists fired the rocket at MH17, even citing YouTube videos as evidence, which is amazing. But the British press at the time, they were going absolutely tonto and coming up with headlines like, "Putin killed my son." Now, Russia's just released satellite images, allegedly, of a Ukrainian jet firing a missile. So what's your take on this latest evidence, if true, would shut this lot up for a while?
Where's the evidence from the United States? They're watching everything that everybody does, and they can't come up with any footage or satellite images of this? That's what it'll take. And they're not doing it. Again, I remember how this whole thing unfolded. I remember the day very well, because it was the same day that the other mass murderers, Israel, launched the attack against Gaza. So while the media was focused on the downing of the Malaysian airliner over Ukraine, Netanyahu launched the attack against Gaza. And that didn't hardly made the news until probably it started generating news about a week and a half later. So he used that as a cover-up. But immediately we heard from the American vice president, we heard from the American media and the Western media, that Russian separatists shot it down without one bit of proof. Just like what Kev was saying about the reports coming in about, Russian tanks and Russian this inside of Ukraine. And in this age of selfies, how about showing me some photos? No, we can't show you any because that's intelligence. Yeah, we'd be giving up our intelligence. Yeah, you have to have no intelligence to believe they're crap. So it is all one big lie. Don't forget, Saddam Hussein had weapons of mass destruction and ties to Al-Qaeda. Hey, remember that Gulf of Tonkin incident that started the Vietnam War that never happened? I smoked, but I didn't inhale. I didn't have sex with that woman, Monica Lewinsky. Why would anybody believe they're crap?
And that's the thing, Mr. Celente, because last year, when Obama tried to get boots on the ground and go into Syria the first time, it didn't happen. Yet you add in the Yazidis, and now I read it, 73% of Americans actually approve of boots on the ground and more intervention in the Middle East. And it's the same over here in the UK. We've been told it's ISIS this and ISIS that. Do you feel that probably right about now is a very, very strong likelihood we're going to see some kind of false flag to justify further encroachment into Syria?
I would say yes. And not only further encroachment into Syria, but more cause for war. That's all they do, is they keep promoting war, whether false flag or real. Again, I mentioned the lies of the other ones, whether it was going back to Remember the Maine. So, yes, I believe that's what's going to happen. And as you well point out, the people buy it real quick. In the last TrendsJournal, the spring edition, I wrote a story, the summer edition rather. I did a story about George Bush's 9/11 speech and the one 9 days later when he took us to war against Afghanistan. And I began it by saying only a madman would speak these words, and only a nation dumbstruck with fear would believe them. And dumbstruck they were, because 90% of the American public bought the Afghan lie. I broke down his speech, sentence by sentence, not one fact in it. Not one. Even a phrase going back to 2001. And a man by the name of Osama bin Laden. A man by the name of, And all of a sudden he became public enemy number one. So the people are very easily led with propaganda, whether it's in the United States, whether it's in the UK, whether it's in Pakistan or Russia, you name the country. Propaganda is a good business to get into. You could do it cheaply and get great results.
And our man over here right now, Moron, as I call him, he's actually shouting about he's worried another financial collapse is on the way. Now, with these markets being so rigged, Mr. Celente, surely they know when the next big collapse is coming. But how do we go about eradicating somewhere like the City of London? We see these LIBOR cases and the latest one about setting interest for currency exchanges. They were fined something like £1 billion. But when you actually look at how much trade they make on the foreign currency desk each day, it's something like $3 trillion. How do you actually go about punishing these people?
Well, actually, it's $5.3 trillion.
Wow.
Yeah, and what it is that there's no consequences for actions anymore. They say that the fish rots